Amanda, thank you so much for taking the time today for being a part of our Community of Practice channel here on YouTube. And on behalf of SETI, I want to thank you for your leadership today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Matt.
Oh, you're so welcome. So, as always, we begin by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So if you can please do us the honors by introducing yourself to our listeners and viewers and tell us about your amazing work.
Mm. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Amanda Janoo. I work as the Economics and Policy Lead at the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, or WEAll. And I'm also a Family Economic Security Fellow at New America.
There we go. Thank you so much for that. So what inspires you about the work that you do?
Mm. Oh, well, so I am based in Vermont in the United States, and you may have heard about the democratic crisis we are facing at the moment. So I will say that, honestly, a lot of my optimism has been shaken recently, but one of the things that I've been working on currently that has given me a lot of hope is connecting with and supporting 7 different state level economic systems change movements and networks who are really trying to advance new definitions of progress that are not centered in the economic growth or financial metrics, but really centered in social and ecological visions of well-being. And they have on this basis developed transformative economic strategies and are building power and movements through multi-stakeholder organizing and deliberative democratic processes. And so seeing examples like in Hawaii of the Aina Aloha economic futures that are really trying to advance alternative visions and indicators and metrics for evaluating economic development based in Native Hawaiian Indigenous values and principles, or in Hawaii, seeing the incredible work, in Washington State, the incredible work that they have been doing around transforming systems of governance to really center people with lived experience and create much more upstream interventions around economic strategies to ensure the well-being of generations to come. That's all giving me a lot of hope. And even just this morning, actually, I'm part of a group that is helping to revise the International Baccalaureate, the IB programs for international students, economics curriculum. And that just reading through a lot of the gap analysis and thinking about different ways that students, particularly at that age of like 16, 17, can really expand their understanding of what the economy is, can be, its purpose. That's really inspiring for me and hopeful at this moment. And there are many other things, but yeah, that's what comes to mind first.
That's awesome. I know we go through, there's a lot of turmoil governmentally and all that, but that's just the beauty of what we do because it is our, our passion and our purpose and we put that people first and we really want to see the change. So, we sometimes we just have to bypass and just clear the smoke and get right down to the causes of what is the issue and how can we solve this issue, at least the best way that we can,
Mhm.
So that's fantastic. So yeah, so any challenges or barriers, that you face along the way and how have you overcome them or at least in the process of overcoming?
Oh, I mean, the barriers to economic systems change are many, right? And so I think like one of the big barriers that I feel very passionate about, when we think about, you know, any change, like the economy is just the way we produce and provide for one another, right? Like we are the economy. And so we need as many people as possible to be engaged in this process of transforming these systems. And I think when we think about barriers within popular perceptions, often the economy feels really intimidating or overly complex or something that's just sort of out there beyond our control. So for me, I get a lot of passion around demystifying the economy, really illustrating what alternative ways that it can be, giving practical examples of where we see alternative ways of at the business level, at the governmental level, at the collective community level of different ways and motivations for those systems. And I think within our own movement, a lot of the work I do is trying to connect actors across the sort of economic system space. And one of the big barriers is just, yeah, there's a lot of like ideological rigidity sometimes, right? Like people feel very confident about their particular theory or approach. And then there's also quite a bit of competition then that leads to fragmentation. And so I thought of this because your whole point of really centering people first and relationships first, I think that's really huge. I think one of the big learnings I've found is that when you show up with vulnerability yourself, where you acknowledge the challenges that you're facing, the mistakes that, and learnings that we've made ourselves, it provides permission for others to also be vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, you build trust. And I also think that centering fun is really huge, right? So center like connection as whole people first and foremost before you get into a lot of the work-oriented things is huge for yeah, we move at the speed of trust, as it were.
Absolutely. Fun for sure. I mean, everything is mental. Everything comes from the mind, whether ideas, everything comes from the mind. So we have to make sure that our mind is well, and whole and purposeful. Like there's meaning behind what we're doing, and there's not that feel of emptiness or falsehood. Like there's actual care and concern for community because at the end of the day, whether we wear a suit, whether we wear blue collar, we're all part of community and we all have impact within community. So yeah, fabulous.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so do you have any key priorities you're working on? Anything you want to amplify at this time?
Mm, my goodness. Well, again, as part of my existential crisis, right? I am really sitting with this a lot. I feel like my country, but also the world is in a moment of really huge changes and fluxes and different types of challenges than maybe we've had. So there are certain priorities that I've been focusing quite a bit on, and I am in a sense sitting and really trying to make sure that those are still the appropriate ones. But like one focus area has been a lot on narratives. So what is our understanding of the economy? Like, and what does it mean, are like effective strategies for like sort of persuasive framing and like shifting popular conceptions of the economy. And so part of that is through like a literature review of all of any existing proper research that has been done around in the US, for example, right? Like there's a strong emphasis on meritocracy. And so it's important to really emphasize, to your point, right? Like the value of purposeful work, right? And how to really center that as opposed to only emphasizing, like the economic system as a mechanism for like wealth creation, but like what does it mean to do good work and to be of service through that work, and that as an important sort of framing for ways in which you can actually help to shift that system. And we're going to be doing interviews with folks across a wide range of different sort of economic system space organizations and approaches and target groups, understand what messages are they using, what's working, what's not, where do they see important leverage points, what do they need in order to more effectively communicate? Because I think so much of the challenge also is we tend to be really jargony and technocratic a lot of the time. And so how do we move from the head into the heart, like to connect with the core values of things that people really care about most in terms of fairness, freedom, dignity, connection, these kind of things that I think can mobilize a lot more action in this moment.
That's right. That's right. To have that quilting, that's what the whole story behind a quilt is. Everybody has their piece, a patch and sew it together and make a beautiful piece. And that's what it's about. And I think, society really forgets that. We get caught up in the mundane, we get caught up in the me, myself, and I, and don't see that it's a broader picture, like that African proverb, if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. So
Yes, yes.
so how do you feel about the future of social impact? Where do you see it going?
Mm. I mean, In my most hopeful moments, and I think one of the really beautiful things about the work that I've been able to do with the Wellbeing Economy Alliance is that it's a global network and organization. And so a big part of this shift has been around developing new definitions and metrics of progress. So national performance frameworks that no longer just centered in GDP in terms of our how much we're sort of producing and consuming, but really our quality of life and the quality of well-being of our environment. And once you have that as your starting point, right? If you're really evaluating your collective success by our level of trust and equity and connection and sustainability, then everything becomes about social impact, right? It really fundamentally transforms our notion of value and which types of economic activities or behaviors we really want to encourage and reward within this system because it has a direct and immediate positive contribution to social and ecological goals, right? And so that social impact orientation. And I think we are at that tipping point where, in my country, for example, the majority of people now feel they have a job that need not or should not exist, meaning they are doing work that they feel is contributing nothing to the world or actively making it worse off. And that in and of itself is a clear indicator of a failing economic system. And so I think there's an intrinsic desire for people to be doing work that they feel is really contributing to the major crises, but also of the better future we envision, and also an raising awareness by governments that we can no longer just keep growing the economy, take some money through taxes to fix the damages that were done to people and planet in the process. And we're going to have to move upstream and really redesign a lot of our economic activities so that they're regenerative and equitable by design and aligned with the needs of humanity moving forward.
That's right. Yeah. And I always say, we are laying the foundation, but there's more generations to come. And if you notice, they are holding more and more us accountable. Their patience level is thinning. As you see,
Mhm.
if they're not seeing the action, if they're not seeing change within their community, if we're not doing the basic necessities, the government is not helping on the basic necessity, food,
Mhm.
clothes, and shelter. If not even that can be sustained on, then hey, we're gonna make that change, and that's the generations that are here and coming. You
Mhm.
know, I just saw a baby come out the womb already in the motions of walking. I had her
Woo,
first doctor visit, and she's
woo,
putting one foot
woo.
in front of the other. Just came out the womb. So
Wow.
these generations are not playing. So we
Yes.
have what we can lay that strong foundation so that
Mhm.
it can leave a rippling positive impact for next generations to come.
Absolutely. Have you come across at all like the Wales Future Generations Act in your like interviews so far?
I think I briefly heard something like that, but enlighten me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also one of I think one of the most exciting examples right now where the the Welsh government went through a process of asking their citizens like what kind of Wales do you want to leave for your children and grandchildren? And on this basis, they developed these 7 high-level well-being goals around global responsibility, like cultural and community connection, equity, health, biodiversity, prosperity, but within planetary boundaries. And then they
Mhm.
passed a legislation that required the whole of government to completely sort of transform, to take this longer
Mhm.
term thinking, so to set 25-year targets in all of those dimensions, to require every agency to work collectively towards their achievement. So it wasn't just the health agency that has to consider health, transportation, and everybody has to consider all 7 goals. Well, and they created a Future Generations Commissioner whose tenure is always longer than any political administration or cycle to be
Mhm.
semi-autonomous to help hold accountability of that process. And so
Mhm.
what that looked like in practice was when they wanted to build a new highway, the Future Generations Commissioner was like, okay, so tell me how this is going to contribute to our well-being goal.
Mm,
And when they couldn't make the case for contributing to any of the goals except for maybe one, they ended up putting an entire freeze on all new highway development so that that budget would be redirected into public transportation and active travel, which they could make the case for contributing to a more equitable, healthier, globally responsible, et cetera, Wales. And so this future orientation, this, thinking about generations to come, to your point, right? It's really,
mm,
really important. And we're seeing that paradigm shift, I think, in action.
yes, yes.
Places.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. That needs to be implemented everywhere. That's amazing. My goodness. So, all right. So let's just summarize, if you could summarize for us your ultimate goal and what success looks like to you.
Oh, well, my ultimate goal, like I feel like my purpose in life, or what I hope to achieve, is to transform the global economic system. Yeah, so to really transform the ways that we produce and provide for one another so that they are directly supporting the quality of life and the well-being of all species on this planet. And so, it's a pretty lofty, big goal, but I would say I'd personally take just a binding code of conduct for multinational corporations. I think if we can achieve that in our lifetime, if they are held to a higher labor, environmental, tax standards, I think that would already create enough space for self-determination in these other levels to allow for more systemic transformations. So, you know,
Mhm.
bold ambitions, but if there's one indicator of success, I think that would be one I really hope to see in my lifetime.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, Amanda, this has been so inspirational. I feel your passion, like it's just oozing out to me. And, I know other people will be able to feel it too. So, my last question for you is any closing thoughts or calls to actions at this time?
Mm. Oof. I mean, I think the major one is just that, yeah, this is the moment in history. I think we're all on this earth for this particular moment in history that will determine so much. And I think that in this moment, it can be easy in fear to fall back into ourselves, to feel like we need to just like hoard enough in our basement to make sure we're okay, or to make sure we're just looking out for our family, like our people. But as much as possible to recognize that like we're all interconnected, and the freedoms and the rights of some are directly a reflection of our freedoms and rights as well. And so to stand in solidarity and to step up, I guess, in this moment, to advance freedom, democracy for everybody.
That's right. That's right. It's our birthright. So we will always inspire for more. And it's like many hands make light work. So that's what
Mhm.
we're hoping for. So Amanda, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it. Appreciate all you do. Much success to you in the now and in the future. And
Mm.
we will close the way that we began by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So,
Mm.
Amanda, I don't think it's goodbye. I think it's see you later. Well, I'm sure we'll be doing some more collaborations and invites to you. So, all the best. Okay. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt.
All
Bye,
right. You
everyone.
take care. Bye bye.